Okay, you have your Bibles open. Join me in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Like I said, I'm going to try to cover the whole book. I'm going to start by reading the first 11 verses, which picks up, it's an introduction, it picks up many of the themes. And then we're going to take up some, I guess what I'll call kind of representative themes of this book and work our way through them and really try to catch the big picture of the book of Ecclesiastes. All right, let's dig in. Verse 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem. Meaningless. Meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What does man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? Let me pause right there for just a second. I want to highlight those three words, under the sun. As you continue to read through this book, you'll see that phrase again and again and again and again. And it means something really important in this book. It means something like this, that if you were to divide kind of the universe into the physical world and the spiritual world, the phrase under the sun represents all the things in this physical world. If you were to posit that there was no God, that all there was just this material world around us, the affairs that happen under the sun would be those affairs of this material physical world. And maybe some of you say to yourself, well, wait a second, I came to church. Why would we just talk about what's under the sun or, what's in this physical world? I already acknowledge that there's a spiritual world. Hold on a second. I think it's probably one of these cases. One, you may have walked through these doors today, and the truth is you never really spend any time thinking about the spiritual world. I mean, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not, I'm not sure, but at least functionally you live your life as though that's all there is what's here under the sun. Some of us, we may even be committed to that. Someone drug you here today, you wonder, why am I in church? I don't believe in any of this stuff anyway. This book is for you, I'm sure of it. But it's not just for you, it's for all of us, because the truth of the matter is, and if you came through these doors today and you think everyone here is super spiritual, not true. Most of us here, as much as we'd like to claim that we've totally surrendered our life to God and everything's for Him, when we get up on Monday morning and we live our life, most of us, all we care about is what's under the sun, what's in this physical world, our pursuits, the way we spend our time, the desires of our heart, they're all fixed on this physical world. And I would say it'd be very rare if there would be someone in this world who is just so focused on God that they just rise above the affairs under the sun. And so I think this book is entirely practical for all of us, because most of us, our whole hearts, our whole time, our whole desires, they're all fixed on what's under the sun. And so anyway, the writer of this book he sort of posits in this book, what if that's all there was, just this material world, just this physical world? What if that's all there was? Anyway, what does man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? Generations come, generations go. But the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets, hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the north, it turns to the south. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. There is no remembrance of men of old, and even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow. Okay, here's what I'd like to do. This book is, it's fascinating, it's complicated. I'd like to take what I think are probably the three biggest themes that run through the entire book. They're all indicated here by at least one verse of what we've just read and kind of work our way through. The very first theme that I'd like to pick up is the theme of work, labor. And one of the things we're going to see as we take up each of these topics, the writer of this book says it's meaningless, it's vanity, it's like a breath. Who cares? It's worthless. And let's just talk about work. And I think it's an important topic. Verse 3, by the way, this will set the tone. It's a rhetorical question. It says, what does man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? Like I said, it's a rhetorical question. The implied answer is this, nothing. It's worthless. I mean, we go to work, we get up every morning, we drive there, we do our work. It's meaningless. Maybe so that as we work our way through the book, I set the right tone. I'll give an illustration. Have you ever heard of Sisyphus? I'm sure you have. I mean, maybe the name doesn't ring a bell right now, Sisyphus, but somewhere back there in high school or in college, you took a philosophy class and you talked about Greek and Roman mythology, and maybe this picture, it'll help kind of ring the bell. Sisyphus. Sisyphus was in Greek mythology, this sort of celestial being who was involved in espionage. He was giving away the celestial secrets to mortal human beings, and the gods needed to do something. They didn't know what to do. They decided they needed to punish him, and they came up with what they thought was the worst possible punishment, and this is what they did. They confined him to this place where he had work to do. And this was his work. Every day when he got up in the morning, there was this large rock, and he had to roll it uphill, and he'd get just like 10 feet from the top, and that rock would roll all the way back down to the bottom. And the next day, he'd have to get up, and he'd have to roll that rock back up the hill, and the next day, he'd get all the way down to the bottom. And every day for the rest of eternity, this was the lot that he was confined to as a punishment for his crimes, Sisyphus. If nothing else, you're better at Trivial Pursuit than when you came in here today, right? Sisyphus. The point of this Greek and Roman mythology, I think, is this, that hell is having to carry out a pointless task repeatedly from which nothing ever comes, except the need to do it again. And I would say this, that the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes basically says, whatever your job is, whatever your work is, it's pretty much like that. It's pretty much just like that. I don't know what you do for a living, whatever it is. You get up in the morning, maybe we'll update this a little bit. Hell is like data entry. Every day you go to work, you're chained to a desk. There's a big pile of papers. Your job is to enter the data into the computer. You fill it all out. The next day, there's another stack of papers. You go to work. The next day, there's another stack. It never ends. Somehow or another, there's another. I mean, you're rolling that rock uphill. Some of you, you cut hair. Customers come in, you cut their hair, it's nice and trimmed up. 2 weeks later, they come back, it's grown back out, you cut it again. 2 weeks later, they come back, you cut it, right? I mean, you're carrying out these sort of mindless tasks again and again. What do you get from it? What do you gain by doing it? Look with me at chapter 2, beginning at verse 17. The writer of this book says, look, if all there is what's under the sun, this sort of physical world, then it doesn't really matter what your job is. It's just pointless. And verse 17, he says, so I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to one who comes after me. And who knows whether he'll be a wise man or a fool? Yet he'll have control over all the work into which I've poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What does a man get for all the toil and anxious striving for which he labors under the sun? All his days his work is pain and grief. Even at night his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless. And there's some of us, we take our work very seriously. We stay up at night thinking about it. It really bothers us, and so we don't sleep at night. And this is his point. You know what? It doesn't matter how hard you work. Maybe you're doing something that's just brilliant. At some point, you're going to stop, and someone's going to come along, and they're not going to do it with the same skill that you did. And it's going to come to nothing. What difference does it make that you do what you do really in this world? If you sit back and think about it, not much. If you weren't there, the world would go on. There's some of us, and we ease ourselves with these thoughts. Well, my rock is more important than their rock. They're rolling their rock up, or my rock is more interesting. It's got, at least as I'm pushing it up, it's more interesting what I do. I pity that guy who's got like a really flat rock, We sort of calm ourselves, we ease ourselves, but really, we're just rolling that rock uphill, and every day we do it again, but it's not making much difference. fact, it's not making much difference at all. And by the way, as you follow this theme throughout the book, the work that we do, it has what I'll call anomalies that just make it all the more painful okay, look, it's so important to us, right? We all work, every single one of us. One of the first questions we start asking kids, what are you going to be when you grow up? What are you going to do? Because we all have it. We've got to feed ourselves. We've got to clothe ourselves. We're all going to have to work. But really, it's just kind of a chasing after the wind. It's meaningless. It's pointless, he says. And to add to all that, there are these anomalies. Let me see if I can enumerate them. Ecclesiastes chapter 10 says this: if a man's lazy, the rafters sag. If his hands are idle, the house leaks. I think we understand that pretty well. If you're a lazy person, it's not going to go well with you in life. Life's going to kind of bite you if you don't have some get up and go. That same chapter says this: whoever digs a pit may fall into it. Whoever breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. Whoever quarries stones may be injured by them. Whoever splits logs may be endangered by them. In other words, if you're lazy, life's going to bite you. But if, on the other hand, you're industrious, you're enterprising, you're entrepreneurial, it's going to probably bite you anyway. It really makes no difference. The guy who's lazy is going to get bit by life. The guy who puts himself out there is going to fall into the quarry he dug. You see that? Either way, your work's going to bite you. That's an anomaly to the whole thing. All right, here's another anomaly. He says, I've seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. How true is this? You must have seen it, right? There's one guy over here, he's brilliant. He's passionate, he does his job, she does her job, unbelievable, conscientious, and just never gets successful for whatever reason. There's another person over here, they're a fool. They don't know what they're doing, and they don't do it well. They're not educated. They just bumble along, and yet they strike it rich. Hasn't this happened to you? Haven't you at some point said, why'd they get a promotion and not me? How's that person live like that, and why am I stuck living? Talk about unfair. You're rolling your rock with so much skill, and that joker over there is just reaping all the benefits of it. It makes rolling that rock all the more drudgery. And that's one of the points of this book. It's just you know what? At the end of the day, all our work, all our effort, all our toil, all our labor, it's meaningless. And now the second theme exacerbates the problem. And the second theme, many of you, as I start talking about it, you're just going to wish I hadn't. And it's the theme of death, which plays very prominent in this book. I want you to look with me back in chapter 1, if you're still with me, at verse 11. There's no remembrance of men of old, and even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow. What this verse is basically saying is something like this. Listen. Maybe you remember your parents, maybe you remember your grandparents, maybe even some of us here, we remember our great-grandparents. But beyond that, doubt we can even start to say their names. Don't you realize they had the same stresses, the same worries, the same anxieties? They stayed up night with the same emotions, they went through the same troubles, and we can't even think of their names. Gone. And the verse goes on to say, don't you realize the same thing's going to happen to you? You get up in the morning, you do the very best you can, you're working away at it, you're staying up at night, you're thinking through things. There's a lot of, some of us, we have so much stress in our life because we're really rolling that rock. We're working at it, and we think it's going to matter. You know what? 4 generations from now, people won't know anything about us. Here's the truth. The world will not care whether we were a saint or whether we were a mass murderer. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12. At some number of generations, people will forget. It won't have mattered. Kind of depressing, right? Under the sun, life is just, it's just so meaningless, so purposeless. Maybe you don't like the fact that we talk about death, and the author of this book realizes this. I mean, some of us were just so averse to even thinking about this subject because not only is it the fact that we're afflicted with having to push that rock uphill every single day, but finally, without warning, death is going to come upon us. And many of us, we'd like to just say, no, I'm not even going to think about that. But the writer of this book says, well, you should. This is what he says, it's better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. For death is the destiny of every man, and the living should take this to heart. You know what this verse says? You got a choice between going to a party or going to a funeral. Choose a funeral. Because you're not going to learn anything about the reality of life at a party. It's when you're there realizing, I'm going to die too. That's where you learn something. That's where you learn something. In fact, as you get to the end of this book, and maybe it's worthwhile even you turning there, I'm going to read it in chapter 12. There's kind of a statement to young people. And if you're here today and you're still young, you still have some youth and vigor, then let the rest of the people who are here who are much older be a witness to you. Okay? Because as I read this, people are going to start shaking their head. It just talks about the process of getting older and then finally dying. And this is what it says, beginning in verse 1. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them, before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark, and the clouds return after the rain, when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop, when the grinders cease because they're few, and those looking through the windows grow dim, when the doors to the street are closed, and the sound of grinding fades, when men rise up at the sound of birds and all their songs grow faint, when men are afraid of heights and of dangers in the street, when the almond trees blossom and the grasshopper drags itself along and desire no longer is stored, then man goes to his eternal home and mourners go about in the streets. I mean, really poetic. Makes it sound really good, but, do you hear what it's saying? Like, young person, wake up. Don't wait until you can't see anymore, till you can't hear anymore, till you're afraid to climb a ladder. Don't wait until your strength is gone. Don't wait until you can hardly drag yourself out of bed when your knees are so worn out and you're facing sickness and the doctors are making you drink contrast. And don't wait until then to decide that there might be a God and there's something else than what's under the sun. Now's the time. When you have strength, when you have energy, when it can make a difference. Don't wait. There's some of us who are here, like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's struggle to get out of bed. A lot of your friends have died. Is life still worth living? You just sort of, you know what I'm talking about. And it's like an exhortation to young people, like, now's the time. When you have your strength, when you have your mind, when you have your passions, when you have your desires, now's the time to realize there is something else than what's just under the sun. Does that make sense? This poem, it goes on and then speaks to all of us. Remember him before the silver cord is severed, or the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, or the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. Again, just some great poetry. It's like, hey, wake up before you're dead, because you're going to be. Because you're going to be. And there's even a scripture passage, I think I just have to put it before you. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 12 says, moreover, no man knows when his hour will come. As fish are caught in the net or birds taken in a snare, so men are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. You don't know when that silver cord is going to be severed, when that golden bowl is going to shatter. You don't know when your dust is going to return to the ground. You see it all the time, right? People, they're gone. Wake up, it's going to happen to you too. You're living right now for what's under the sun, for the concerns of this world, but just really quickly, it's going to be over. And it's better that you realize that than just keep partying away and pretending that it's only the pursuits under the sun that are worth living for. Okay, that's the first two themes. By now, we probably all want to take a deep breath. Like, I thought church is supposed to be uplifting. Let's pick up the third theme. It's probably the most important. It's the theme of desire. And if you're back with me in chapter 1, I want you to look with me at verse 8. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. In other words, what this passage is saying is we have these desires that we can never get them satisfied. And I know many of you are fairly young, and probably what I'm about to say, it may not register at all, but I hope at some point you remember back and you think about what I'm about to say right now. We have these desires that are so big, there's nothing in the world that will satisfy them. Our eyes will never see enough, our ears will never hear enough, our heart will never get enough. Our desires include things like this: to be loved, to love. They include things like this: to have meaning and purpose in life. That our life somehow will extend beyond just the few years we have in this life, and will have some permanency and some eternity. And I'd say this: if you're young, you just have absolutely no idea how hungry your soul is. You think you do. You think you know what will satisfy, but those of us who have thought about this long and hard, you realize that it is almost impossible to become content in this world. And that's one of the themes of this book. I mean, it is almost impossible to become content. So if you're young, you're saying things like this: okay, I know I'm not happy now, I know I'm not content yet, but this is what's going to happen. I'm going to find the one. We're going to fall in love. And we're going to get married, and it's going to be awesome. Or you're saying things like this: when I finally finish school and I get that job, then I'm going to be happy. Or you're saying things like this: when I finally buy a home, or when I finally have kids. Like, you know you're not happy now, but when those things happen, then I'm going to finally be content. Many of us, we've had that happen to us, and we're saying things like this: when the kids finally move out of the home, then I'll be, and at every stage, you're just going to find, and here's the thing, we live in a world of Facebook, and so you have this idea, every other person is totally content, and it's just me. Not true. Every person in this room, their soul is not satisfied with the things of this world. It's just not. We try to stuff ourselves full of the things of the world. We are not satisfied. This verse: whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owner except to feast his eyes on? In other words, many of us were saying, well, if I just get financially secure, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be happy. I want you to look with me at chapter 2. It's really a big theme here in the book of Ecclesiastes. The writer of this book, he actually at one point, because he has access to it, goes and denies himself nothing to see if there are things in this world that he can fill himself up with and finally find happiness and contentment, and realizes, there's nothing. The shine wears off. The newness of it quits. I just can't get happy with it. Look with me at verse 4 in chapter 2. The writer of this book, he says this: I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of a man. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward I received for all my labor. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. See what he says? I mean, right now, many of us, we fool ourselves by saying, if I just had that, then I'll be happy. If I get a job, if I just have money, if I have a home, if I have a family, if I have a spouse, we say to ourselves, if I just get more stuff, I'll be happy. Others of us who have probably gotten in a middle age, we have all that stuff. we really become a nuisance to society because we say to ourselves, well, I've probably just gotten the wrong stuff. If I had a different spouse, if I lived in a different house, if I had a different car, if I had a boat, if I had... And so we start getting rid of stuff because we think the problem is not in the stuff. Now, I don't know about you, but at least for me, I've walked past magazines like this at the checkout counter. Okay? Selena, Jennifer Aniston, Justin Bieber. Don't make me put Miley Cyrus up here. These are people who literally, they have it all. It's our dream, right? They've got money, they've got fame, people know their name, they have access to anything, they have bodyguards, they can stay at any hotel, they can go to any paradise, they can travel anywhere in the world. They've got it all. Haven't you learned the lesson from these people yet? We see them every single day. Why would we want to be like them? Don't you know? Your soul is so hungry. It's so hungry. It will never be filled with things of this world. Okay, there's a writer, his name is C.S. Lewis. He wrote a book called Mere Christianity. In that book, he has a chapter called Hope. And he said it way better than I can, so I decided I'm just going to read from what he said. He said this: most people, if they had really learned to look into their own hearts, they would know that they do want, and want most acutely, something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but they never quite keep their promise. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love, or we first think of some foreign country, or first take up some subject that excites us, are longings which no marriage, no travel, no learning can really satisfy. Then he says, I am not now speaking of what would ordinarily be called unsuccessful marriages, or holidays, or learned careers. I am speaking of the best possible ones. There was something we grasped at in that first moment of longing, which just fades away in reality. I think everyone knows what I mean, he says. The wife may be a good wife. The hotels and scenery may have been excellent, and chemistry may be a very interesting job, but something has evaded us. I mean, we do know what he means, right? I mean, we remember, those of us who fell in love and got married, how awesome it was. I finally found the one for me. It's great. It's beautiful. And we're married now, and it's good. Right? I mean, it's nice. But it doesn't satisfy my soul the way I thought it was going to. You took a trip. It was awesome. It was wonderful. It was beautiful, but it didn't last forever, and now you're kind of back to your dull life. You got a job. I mean, you wanted to become a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, and you became it. And you thought, finally, when I become that thing, all my problems will fade away because I'll finally be that thing. And you are one now, and you're rolling that rock up the hill like the rest of us. You get in your car in the morning, and you drive to work, and I mean, it's good. It's great. But I mean, be honest with yourself. Do the things of this world really satisfy? Now, like I said, there's a few options you have. I think when we're young, and when you normally kind of go through phases, when you're young, you say to yourself, if I have this, if I have that, if I get married, if I get my job, if I have a house, if I have children, then I'll be satisfied. At some point in middle age, you say to yourself, well, okay, I got the wrong things along the way. I got the wrong job, I got the wrong spouse, I got the wrong car, and so we start trying to change those things, and we still don't get satisfied. The third phase, and many of us, we may have fallen into this, is you just finally say to yourself, man, the passion of youth is stupid. There's no happiness, so just roll your rock. There's no better spouse out there. There's no happiness. And some of us have just given up. But this is what C.S. Lewis says, and I think it's brilliant. It's another way. It's the Christian way. He says, creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exist. A baby feels hunger. Well, there's such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there's such a thing as water. Men feel sexual desire. Well, there's such a thing as sex. He says then, if I find in myself a desire for which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. What a statement. And you gotta look into your heart. You gotta know this. You gotta understand this. We are so hungry in our souls. And we may think to ourselves, I can fill it with a romantic love. I can fill it with a vacation. I can fill it with a job. I can fill it with kids. I can fill it with a house. No. You'll still be hungry. You have this desire. And C.S. Lewis says, well, look, for every desire you have, there's a corresponding thing out there. Your desires for something beyond the walls of this world. Does that make sense? Something more than what's merely under the sun. And so, if you get that at all today, it'll change your life. You'll stop living for what's merely under the sun. By the way, here's how the book of Ecclesiastes ends. I just think it's brilliant. He goes through this whole thing. It's so depressing. And then he says this, now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Okay, so at the end of the day, we've considered everything there is under the sun. It's all meaningless. It's all vanity. So here's all I can tell you. Fear God. By the way, the word fear means something like to revere, to love. He's saying something like, this is it. You've got to fear, love, and revere God. You've got to live for something beyond the walls of this world. And if that makes any sense to you, then I have to tell you this. I mean, the story of the Bible is there's a story of a God of love who created this world, created human beings to live with him and for him in a relationship of love. And we human beings, this is what we did. We kind of spat in his face and we said to God, you know what? I really prefer the things you give me rather than you. And we walked away from him. And that's why we have all the troubles that we have, as we've just finished reading. I mean, if you try to stuff that hole in your heart with things of this world, it just never satisfies and creates all kinds of problems. And so here's the good news that this entire book, the Bible, gives, is that this God who loves, he loves so intensely, so deeply, that even when we walked away from him and chose the things that don't matter over the thing that really does, he kept on pursuing us. So much so that he sent his son, Jesus Christ, into this world. And his son came and lived this perfect life we couldn't live. He died a death we couldn't die. And the purpose of that life and death was this, that he could take all of what we've done against him, all of what's wrong, and put it on that cross, and Jesus be punished in our place so that our relationship with him can be restored. And there's no other way to God. It's just through Jesus. And if in the midst of our talk today you said, wow, I get it, I need something more than what's under the sun, I need God, then this is what the Bible says, that you should turn from your sin and its consequences. You should turn from just pursuing what's under the sun in the world. You should turn to Jesus, because it's through him that your relationship with God will be restored. And if your relationship with God is restored, then let me tell you something. Everything you do starts to have meaning. Your work, your relationships, your life, even your death starts to have meaning and purpose. And so I just urge anyone who's listened today, and it makes even the tiniest amount of sense, don't wait. Do not wait until you're old and you wish that you could have this moment back. Make today be the day where you abandon your pursuits under the sun and you begin to live beyond the borders and walls of this world.